Hello and welcome back to the weekly Waypoint. To the 14 of you who watch these no matter what, how's it going? To the others who I might be able to grab the attention of depending on a saucy title and a bit of gameplay they're interested in, how's it going? You're both equally valid. So you thought I was gonna whinge, you thought I was gonna be like, can you change some of this? I know how it is, I watch YouTube, I know how things jump out at you and grab you. I'm not here to judge you. Today we are playing Forza Motorsport 7, giving it one last victory lap, as it were, before its successor comes out, the appropriately titled Forza Motorsport. The only one that there's ever going to be. The devs definitely won't regret this naming decision when they decide to make Forza Motorsport 9. It's funny, right? Because you listen to dev interviews when you're excited, if you're excited about a game coming out as much as I am, sometimes I go and I listen to like dev interviews and previews and stuff, and they talk about how, this is Forza as a platform, this is like the Forza, we want it to be the definitive Forza, that's why we've titled it this way, and I just want to gently direct them to every other game that has done this, and then point at the sequels that come after and go, look, this is going to happen to you. Anyway, idiotic naming conventions aside, so I was like, hey, Forza Motorsport 7 isn't really going to be relevant for that much longer, so I'm going to have one last spin in this game. Like, I'm not just jumping in here to make some footage for the weekly Waypoint. I've been playing this game pretty consistently over the last week, and I'm going to continue to play it right up until the launch of Forza Motorsport 8. I'm going to call it 8 for the sake of sanity. Of course, they could do a really stupid thing and name the game that comes after this upcoming Motorsport 8, but let's not worry about the future too much. I'm literally having therapy for that. Mind you, this doesn't come up in therapy. What's one of the things you're most anxious about? They might call Forza Motorsport 9 Forza Motorsport 8, and then Forza Motorsport 8 is gonna be really difficult. No, I have much more rational thought spirals like, what if my friend hates me because I complimented them? Sorry, cars. So Forza Motorsport comes out on Thursday night / Friday morning. I'm really excited to give it a go, and I was like, you know what? Forza Motorsport 7, I haven't sunk like a huge amount of time into this game. Like, don't get me wrong, I've probably sunk more time into this particular like track racing game than I have most track racing games. Maybe, it rivals how much time I spent in Gran Turismo Sport. It probably surpasses that, but as I've mentioned before, my interest in track racing games is something that's only on the rise. I call them boring racing games. I'm going to start calling them track racing games because I think that's a bit reductive. But usually I've been more interested in like open world racing games and the like, But, my family grew up with Gran Turismo. It was definitely like a household video game, and I played it. I played my fair share of them growing up. And actually, last week I said I was going to go back and play Gran Turismo 2, but I never did. But anyway, as I've been playing Forza Motorsport 7 this week, I've been given the impression that there's some unmined depths to this game that I've yet to really delve into. Like, I've not really looked too far into, like, having familiar cars that I go to in races and stuff in my garage and stuff, because I've focused on single player in this game so hard, and each like different cup is like, oh, we're doing these kinds of cars, so it feels like every different cup I've done I've had like a different car. And of course, one of the main criticisms around this game is they just throw cars at you. You don't really like, something they're trying to address with Forza Motorsport 8 is that you don't necessarily feel like you have favorites in this game. It's not really easy, I guess, via the UI to like have familiar cars that you constantly go to and have a bond with. Is that weird to say? But like, you know what I mean? In Forza Horizon 4, I guess, would be a good example. There's definitely like the familiar cars that I go to for certain types of races, and I feel like I've not had that in Forza Motorsport. But this week I've been kind of like touching on the multiplayer, which is something I've very barely scratched the surface of so far in this game. And I find that in the multiplayer you do have a little bit more of that, like, oh, I'm going to choose which car I'm going to race with, especially with this championship, or this, I guess, multiplayer bracket, or whatever you want to call it, that I've fallen into, which is the ABC bracket, which basically means that you can race in any kind of, there's some weird restrictions based on the track, but you can pretty much race in any class of car you wish to race in, and you will only really be competing against other players of the same class of car. And it's weirdly fun because, like, what tends to happen at the minute is that you get these lobbies of like 4 people, 4 or 5 people, and you all kind of choose a different car class, so you're not really racing against each other, you just kind of happen to be racing on the same track, and it's just kind of chill, and it's fun because at some point you know the faster cars which start later than you are going to pass you by, or if you're racing in a faster car, your kind of objective is to pass these slower cars, but not in a way that's like competitive, just in a way that just kind of feels natural, and I don't know, there's kind of a chill vibe to it, and I wish I'd spent more time doing this in multiplayer, because I think this is really a kind of multiplayer racing that appeals to me. Mind you, if lobbies were more full, I have been in some more full lobbies, it is still competitive because you have like multiple A-class cars, multiple B-class cars. Like you see, I'm constantly in first place in these races. It's just because I'm the only person in that class of car racing. But yeah, I believe Forza Motorsport 8 will probably have a better way of doing things. Forza Motorsport 7 probably isn't going to go down in history as one of the better Forza games. But I feel like there's definitely some unmined depths to this game that I had yet to really tap into. That was a weird metaphor, but I stuck with it and I think it paid off. Anyway, I'm bloody excited for Forza Motorsport 8. I've been watching some previews. I've seen some people think the leveling system is a little bit insane. So basically the way it works in Forza Motorsport 8 is that when you obtain a car, like obtaining cars is going to be a bit more of a rare thing, and when you do obtain a car, it's going to be more of like you level up that car to gain access to the upgrades and stuff. And at first I was really excited hearing about that concept, but then I thought about how much car upgrading and tuning I do in these Forza games, and I realised this might have the potential to fall flat on its face for me, because I'm not really crazy about doing that, about customizing individual cars in terms of performance in the Forza Motorsport series. But the people who are into that hate this system because it's so restrictive, because you have to level every single car up individually. Like even if you own multiples of the same car, which isn't something I could ever see myself caring about, but obviously for the tuners and stuff, that's something they care about. And like it gives you kind of arbitrary access to these different upgrades. So yeah, I can see that being a pain in the ass for them. Again, no, I do hope that fantasy of like, oh, I've got this car and it's my car and I'm going to level it up, I hope that pays off. Just simply having a number next to the car of like the level, I think will go some way with me towards being like, oh, this is one of those cars I've raced a lot, you know, like I'm familiar with this car, we hang out, me and this car. But I also wonder, like, you know, when I jump into a multiplayer race in Forza Motorsport 7 and the restrictions are kind of in place and I don't necessarily have a car that I've got tuned up to spec for that particular race, you know, I can just homologate it, I can just immediately like spend a small amount of credits on some upgrades to make sure that it's in competitive shape. And I have lots of questions about how that's going to work in multiplayer with this new level up system. Is it just going to be an agonizing grind until you get to the point where you're pretty much competitive across all types of cars and classes and stuff? Because that doesn't sound particularly fun. I like these track racing games, but I don't spend hundreds of hours in them. But anyway, those are my closing thoughts on Forza Motorsport 7 and my opening, I guess, takes on what it looks like Forza Motorsport 8 might be like in return. But yeah, just playing these multiplayer races, I was like, you know what, like I don't have like a little Mazda that I like. Oh, I bought this Mazda for this race. Like I like to have a little Mazda in these racing games. And like, yeah, I in the next race I have a Skyline, and I raced with that the other day, and I was like, oh yeah, I like the Skyline. I raced with him the other day, and you know, it's just, I'm not a crazy car enthusiast. I'm more of like a video game person, so cars are more like characters to me than they are cars, I guess. If you really like cars, that was probably painful. Anyway, what else did I do this week? I also got back into old school RuneScape. If you've been following my travels recently, I say travels, I've pretty much had my arse in this chair the entire time, you will know that I have been pretty much mainlining RuneScape 3, apart from Starfield that is, for the last couple of months. And I now in the old school version of that game. Woo! Extremely quick history with the game. I started RuneScape in 2007, played it on and off forever since. I checked out old school RuneScape about, I don't know, for like maybe for the first year after it launched, then I kind of fell off. Then a couple of years ago I made a group Iron Man with Reese, then we didn't do much in that, got 2 videos on the channel of that, and now I'm revisiting that account. Hooray! That's my history of old school RuneScape. So I pretty much have like 10 years of updates to in this other version of RuneScape to check out, and I checked out Guardians of the Rift, which is kind of like their answer to making rune crafting less hellish. and a nice way of acquiring runes for Iron Men as well. Also, I'm doing rooftop agility courses, but those got introduced back when I was first playing Old School RuneScape. It's one of the earliest content updates to the game. But yeah, after starting so many accounts over the years across RuneScape 3 and Old School RuneScape, I'm starting to realize that RuneScape only gets more fun the more progressed your account is. So when you first start an account, I think it is so overwhelming and intimidating, like just the amount of stuff you've got to level and the amount of content which is locked behind quests and stuff, the amount of time that is ahead of you. But the more you progress and the more you earn and the easier you make your quality of life in terms of having resources for things, the more addictive I think the game becomes. And I was very much feeling this on my original RuneScape, well not my original, but my 2013 onwards main RuneScape 3 account for a time, until I got a little bit too jaded about microtransactions in that game, and I took a break and I came back as an Iron Man. This doesn't have to be an entire history, but it's happened with my Iron Man in that game too. Like, I feel like every time I take a break and come back, every time I come back, because I've got further in my account's progression, I get deeper into the game, I get more addicted to the game, and I can feel that happening for Old School RuneScape as well. My account is still very new, I'm barely above 500 total level. For those of you who aren't aware, that means I'm a baby. But even then, I'm starting to acquire some runes so that I can train magic, and I've got some decent, well, not decent, but I've got some I've got some melee armor to kill guards with, and I'm kind of like getting a feel for the old school version of the game again, and it just feels like slipping on a nice pair of jammies. Nice pair of jammies? Is that how you say that? A pair of pajamas? That's not really right, is it? It would be a pair of pajama bottoms. I'm a psychopath. I wear 2 pairs of pajamas. No, wait, that's still wrong. Anyway, I don't want to go on too much about this time of year again, because I did that last week a bit, but I love this time of year. We are now in spooky season, and there are certain games which really vibe with me at this time of year, and I think RuneScape's one of them, because I first started playing RuneScape around this time of year. My friend told me to get into RuneScape over the summer holidays. I summarily failed. I got back to school, and they were like, "How did you find RuneScape?" And I was like, "Couldn't do it. Tutorial Island, too difficult." And they were like, "What the how?" And then they, don't Jagex, but they logged onto my account and finished Tutorial Island for me. And anyway, the whole point is I was first playing it at September, and those memories are pretty, linked to the season. So I think that's probably why I felt beckoned back to the old school version of the game. That, and I'm sure Old School has had an influx of RuneScape 3 players. I don't watch Makeru. He's a fairly prominent RuneScape 3 streamer who recently moved over to Old School RuneScape, probably because of all the controversies recently surrounding Hero Pass and stuff. But I am pretty close in-game friends with someone who does watch Makeru, and summarily followed him over. And that's also one of the things that inspired me to follow them over. So you know what I mean? I'm worried that people are going to think that, oh, this guy's trying to copy Makeru, he's following him over to Old School and doing his own content in Old School because he wants to be Makeru. I don't even fucking know who Makeru is, okay? I don't want to be Makeru. I want to be Hanani. No, actually, that's another point. I feel like my content is kind of similar to Hanani's. Substantially less entertaining, but similar in structure. But I've been making videos this way from long before I ever knew that she existed. Nobody's pointing fingers. Nobody's calling me out, but I feel defensive anyway. I'm just a little guy making my own little YouTube content and having fun and stuff. So thank you for coming along and watching it and enjoying it. This isn't the end of a video. I don't know why I'm making this sound like the end of a video. But a type of video that has ended, that's a transition. Achievement Hunter. Anyone who watches video game videos online has probably heard of Achievement Hunter, but just in case you haven't, it's a YouTube channel from 15 years ago up until maybe yesterday, that, it was a group of friends playing video games, making funny videos about video games. You could probably imagine the kind of thing it is. But back then, it wasn't like the norm. I mean, it wasn't like the most revolutionary idea out there. It wasn't the craziest idea to see, but it was definitely one of the forerunners of that particular genre on YouTube. I wasn't originally sure how I was going to talk about it ending, or if I even was going to, but I think the weekly Waypoint is an appropriate place to talk about it, because ultimately, while for the last few years I really haven't consumed much Achievement Hunter content, it really has been a fairly major part of my entertainment consuming life, I guess, is a way of saying that. I'm actually old enough to have been introduced to Rooster Teeth through Red vs. Blue before Achievement Hunter ever existed. I wasn't there from day one with Achievement Hunter. I think my first Achievement Hunter video was like Fails of the Week 7 or something, but that's still incredibly early days. Obviously, not everything has been perfect. They were unfortunate enough to hire a sexual predator, but he doesn't really belong in Achievement Hunter's legacy, so we will not discuss him further. I wouldn't say Achievement Hunter is the channel which has inspired my content the most. I think their brand of humor is actually fairly different to mine. I think I was joking earlier about, you know, oh, I'm not Makeru, I don't know who Makeru is, I'm Hanani. No, if anything, I think the most inspiration I have for my content as a YouTuber is probably NerdCubed, who is more of a live streamer than an actual like video creator these days, but his editing style I think really rubbed off on me, and like his kind of humor. But all the same, Achievement Hunter is a channel which has provided years and years and years of laughs to me, and it's wild to see it end. I think it is the right choice to see it end, because it's definitely lost a lot of its soul over the last few years for various reasons, but it's definitely like worth touching on, like how crazy it is to see it end. And I'm not like super bummed out about it, I'm not like really that emotional about it. I've already done the thing that they're encouraging everyone to do, which is I've just followed the personalities of Achievement Hunter onto what they've been doing, such as Jeff and Gavin have gone on to do a podcast called Fuckface, which is absolutely hilarious, and they're going to be taking over the Let's Play YouTube channel, which I'm really excited for. Ray from years ago, he left years and years ago. His departure is like a big part of Achievement Hunter lore, but he ultimately wasn't there for the majority of it. Anyway, I watch his live streams. I watch Jeremy Dooley's live streams occasionally. You know, like I followed all these people to their own endeavors, so it's not really a goodbye, but it is the end of something. I think I'd be much more bummed out if a Yogscast ended, because I feel like a lot of that creative, like, juice, for want of a more sane word, is still there with the Yogscast, whereas it hasn't been in Achievement Hunter for years. But yeah, it's over. Achievement Hunter is over. I lived to see it die, and it's a thing, and I'm bad at transitioning to another topic. Anyway, that's about gonna do it. We're about to wrap up here. I've had a very social week, so hopefully this video made sense and I was able to talk and elaborate on my points like a rational human being who can do these things, because I am not complaining, but so many of my friends decided to kind of like pop up in my life this week, and I've had... Actually, now that I think about it, I kind of popped up in half of those conversations. But I've had a delightful time talking to them and meeting with them and doing various things with them. That sounds weird. Not those various things. Something that I implore people to do more often is just like, you know, it can be a bummer when like you and a friend like, you know, go to uni together or something, and then you kind of fall out of touch, and then it's just kind of weird messaging them after a few years. What I try and do now when a friend like exits my everyday life is I try and put a little mental note in my brain to message them like maybe once every month or two. Just like check in with them, like ask them about games, send a silly joke thing or whatever. And I think it's working out pretty well for me. So hey, it's me, your expert in socializing. Thank you for watching. Like and subscribe! I still can't say that naturally.